Hello everyone, this is me writing the fams here back with a vid. So you're gonna just see gameplay stuff in the background, but I just want to do a little discussion. You know what I mean? I just want to do a little talk. I want to talk about Linux real quick. I want to talk about my first 2 months within Linux. You know, is it still something I'm gonna keep around? Is it still something I'm gonna want to keep full time, or do I just want to go back to Windows or whatever? So that's basically what the moral question of this whole thing with the story, with this operating system. So I'll give a little context for why I moved over because I'm sure a lot of people don't know why I moved over from Windows to Linux. So what happened was one day I got hit with a very bad update. That update made it so it ruined my taskbars. Like I couldn't click anything on the taskbar. Everything was randomly moving slow, despite what my SSD is, despite how fast that is. I couldn't get on my internet. It was giving me an issue with trying to activate the browser. Only OBS was the one thing that worked consistently. I don't know why. Even my Steam was messing up at the time. So that was when I chalked it up to just a bad Windows update, right? So that was when I decided to make the decision to move over to Linux. That was when my first adventure into Linux was Linux Mint, and I gotta tell you, I love Linux Mint, but I did not stay there long, and I'll explain why I didn't stay there long when I get there. Um, my first adventure was Linux Mint, and having to be there, just the installation setup, it was pretty good. It was pretty simple. I actually love the fact, and I wish more. I don't expect any other installation service to do that, installation distro to do that, where you're actually able to get on the internet and chill out while your stuff is installing. That's actually pretty good to keep you distracted. So, and it also has Gparted built in as well, which is also pretty good. I actually still use the um, Linux Mint bootloader from time to time. Like I would use it, like I have it installed on one of my hard drives. I would use it in case if I gotta move hard drive space or something like that. So it's actually a staple for me when it goes to like storage and all that other stuff. But another thing that makes it important for me when it goes to Linux Mint was made it important was to be able to go somewhere different, to be able to adapt to change, to be able to get used to change for what was going on. I was always taught that you got to get uncomfortable to get comfortable, and that's exactly what sums up this whole journey for me so far with Linux. Whereas the biggest pro for me so far was, for me, it was a seamless transition in terms of all the files and all the stuff that I have. Like for me, with the history I've built up on Windows, I had a lot of files and I had a lot of history. Download history, media files like, videos, music, all that kind of stuff. I had. I had that kind of stuff. So, to be able to, you know what I mean? Like to be able to like just move some of that stuff over, it was pretty seamless. But it didn't, of course, come without its drawbacks, which is, of course, going to come to our first con. Because of how different both Linux and Windows, how they handle file types and all that kinds of stuff. Of course, it's going to be different when I go into VLC Media Player in my playlist files. Like say for certain shows that I watch, certain shows that I downloaded, because for me it tends to happen where my internet does have an outage and I will need to have stuff to watch. For me, if that playlist isn't working, I will have to manually put that in one by one. Now I wish for VLC Media Player or any other media player it'd be a possibility to just search for the files that you're looking for. But so far I haven't been able to come close with that. But I was able to straighten it out, at least for a time being, until I moved over to Bazite. But I was able to straighten it out, and everything was working, seamlessly. Speaking of seamlessly, another pro was, of course, when I was playing the games, my mods were working seamlessly. I mean, the mods that I have for certain games, such as, I'm going to mention this because it is going to get a little controversial here in a little bit. When I was playing Senran Kagura, my mods for Senran Kagura worked absolutely fine. Whatever I had on Windows at the time, it worked just as good on Linux and didn't have a problem and didn't have an issue at all. The same thing Kind of the same thing happened with Splinter Cell, but as you can see, Splinter Cell, it wasn't all that perfect until I finally figured out the issue. Tales of Berseria, it worked fine with no problem. Um, yeah, roughly a good bit of stuff that I had worked no problem. Look, I'm happy for me more so than anything that my chat, my stream chat function called Sheep Chat, that worked fine with no issues too, which I'm thanking God it did. But I'm gonna find out for sure if any other game I play, such as for me, I have mods on Assassin's Creed Unity. Now those mods are already baked in. I'm gonna find out when I play it if it's gonna stay that way or if there's gonna be some adjustments I'm gonna have to make. But so far so good when it goes to the games that I played on Windows. When I move over to Linux, they work just as good. So that's pretty good of the platform. But of course, like I said, doesn't come without its flaws. The flaws, of course, you gotta use Lutris you have to use one program to install another program. I'm talking about Lutris, and I love Lutris, but I hate the idea that some of these companies, of course, right now, I can't really so much blame this on Linux, but it sucks that I have to use one program to install another. And for me, it's just something I'm just gonna have to get used to. Still gonna have to get used to. It is what it is. Um, but aside from that, as long as it doesn't eat up all of my RAM, as long as it doesn't give me too much of a problem, it's all fine. Biggest con for me so far with Linux is of course, the kernel level games not working. That's a big problem. Kernel level games not, such as for me, I do tend to play Battlefield. I do tend to play the Crew Motorfest. But I can't play those games on Linux because of the kernel anti-cheat issue. So of course, thankfully, I made sure to get I made sure to get Windows 10 again. But I have it under a new save, a new thing. I'm starting fresh with that one, and I'm only keeping it strictly for games that I cannot play on Linux, which is of course, the good thing. Um, I guess another con is depending on how you look at it. For me, it was a bit of a con because I did have to get certain things back up and running, such as my VC face, which is of course my 3D VTuber model, my PNG tuber, my Vieto tube. I had to use that, and it took a bit of work to get those up and running. I mean, yes, I got it now, but for me, I'm only labeling this as a con because if you're someone that is not used to being like tinkering around with the computer, it can kind of fuck you up. I hope that for my fellow people, they don't go through that when they're going over to Linux, or if they are gonna stay on Windows, I hope they don't go through any more issues. But yeah, for me, with having to go through that with Linux, certain setting up my VTuber programs, it was a bit of a hassle. But yeah, hopefully for them, it's not a big deal. Thankfully, there is tutorials out there in the world that shows you exactly how to get those to work. Now, certain tutorials that should be made, and I'm going to chalk this up as a con for the community, not more so for the system itself. I'm shocked the community doesn't put out as many tutorials as much as possible, because I see it as this. If you're going to be telling people to come into Linux, join Linux, blah, 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 the lack of tutorials that you have on specific stuff is absolutely insane. Like, not everyone is going to be able to run shit properly when it went to the EA Play thing like I did it. No one's going to be able to run shit properly like I did with, Ubisoft Connect. There's always going to be an issue. There's always going to be a problem somewhere along the lines. Now, I understand when I said this before, when I asked this question before, someone said the reason why there's not that many tutorials is because of the fact that usually with people in Linux, they know what they're doing. But what does that go for people that are brand new, completely brand new, moving over from Windows that they use their entire life to a brand new operating system such as Linux? And right now for them, that's just uncharted territory. So they need that guidance. They need a way to to learn. And I personally think if I have to be, I'll try my best to be one of those guidances. Now I can only do it on certain things. I can't do it on everything. So I hope with them, I hope later down the line in the future, there's more guides on streamlining Linux to make it smoother for people that are trying to come in, that want to get away from Windows, that don't like what Windows does. You know what I'm saying? So I think something like that would be pretty important. Also, no wallpaper engine. not necessarily, but no wallpaper engine. If you're coming over from, if you loved it on Steam, it won't be. You can technically get it as a plugin on here, but it's not as streamlined. It's not as smooth as, of course, you actually using the wallpaper engine, which is quite a shame. So, you know, depending on how you see it, it could be, it might not worry you. It might worry you. But all in all, that was just Linux Mint alone. With a lot of that, I explained. A lot of that, those issues and everything else that I'm gonna transfer over to you, from Linux Mint to Bazite, that was where those issues lied, and they still do, no matter what distro you hop on. For me personally, but the reason why I hopped on from Linux Mint to Bazite, it was one reason and one reason only, and it hurt my stream situation. You see, I've been rambling on for like over like 3 to 5 minutes, and didn't even talk about the OBS stuff. That's because the OBS stuff is what caused me to go from Linux Mint to Bazite. Because on Linux Mint, what I found out was the game capture program that you would look up and use to capture games from there, it doesn't even work on Linux Mint. So if you're gonna be using Linux Mint, you use it to get yourself comfortable with the platform. But for me, I didn't leave Linux Mint until months later. Not even a month later, like literally weeks later, I should say. Weeks later, I left Linux Mint just to go over to Bazite because, of course, Bazite was supposedly built for gaming. So I said, all right, cool, let me come over here, because if you're built for something I want to do, which is game, let me bring that ass here. So that was what I did. I went right over to Bazite. Now, of course, it's not going to come without any controversy. For me personally, with using Bazite, I was struggling with a lot of things, and thankfully, I did get some help. Even though we were at odds for a little bit. At least I personally felt like we were going to be at odds for a little bit. I don't know if they felt that way, but I've kind of felt that way. With certain disagreements on if certain games or certain things would work. But, we got it settled. And when we got it settled, Bazite for me became the one true home. And it's not hard to see why, because for me, if you look at Bazite on the surface and then you compare that to Windows 10, you be fooled to thinking, oh shit, is this Windows 10 or is this Bazite? Because I love the KDE Plasma thing they have going on here. This is very similar to Windows 10, and I got absolutely no problem with it. I love that for what it is. But one thing for sure was it helped me figure out my OBS game capture problem. Because I can now actually use the game capture the way that it was supposed to be used. The way that I'm supposed to use it. The way I truly would love to use it. So, yeah, for that to be working, it's great to see. Yeah. I'm going to chalk that up as a con and a pro at the same time. A con because of Linux Mint. A pro because of Bazite kind of saved OBS for me. To be able to get that to properly work. However, sadly, at least for me, there's one more con with Linux so far, because I still can't quite figure out a good one yet. I don't know a truly good music player. I understand they have a few out there that's pretty well known, and for them they would say it's established as the music players to use. But for me, I got all this music here, and I can't pick which one I really want, because I don't know which one is all that good. I tried the Raspberry one. That's probably the one they would recommend, but I didn't like how Raspberry handled the music for me. Now, I am going to find what program fits me the most when it goes to music, but as far as I'm concerned, there isn't really a whole lot of good ones there for me so far that is good over, say, iTunes, and I very much do miss iTunes on here. Now, maybe at some point I'll probably just get it back through the virtual machine. I can absolutely do that, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to use my iTunes through the virtual machine. I want to actually use it in person. Speaking of virtual machine, that's a pro for me, because I love the fact that even though I'm on Linux, I can still use my PAL admin that I made a video over. I can still do that. I can still get on my Xfinity stream. I can still get on Peacock. Whatever was essential for me that I had on Windows, it's still kind of there, even though it takes another method to do it. I got absolutely no problem with it because it would suck for me to have to switch back and forth between the OSs in order to get what I'm looking for. The apps have been great, such as the Caden Live, which is honestly, I wish I found Caden Live sooner because for me it's a better fucking Sony Vegas. I don't give a damn. The fact that I didn't have to go through any hassle to install this is amazing. There's that. Firebot for me with my sound alerts is brilliant. So great to know I have that when Mix It Up decides to fuck up and I can't use that. Other than that, it's been great so far. It's been good so far. Would I recommend you Bazite? You know, if you were a newcomer coming from Windows to Linux, I would have to say yes, but of course it's not gonna come without its flaws. There's gonna be some things you're gonna have to deal with. There's gonna be some controversies you may have to deal with if it's something that you want to have on there. Other than that, if you're brand new, if you're just starting out, you don't give a fuck, just start out on Bazite and have fun. I would say for me, this is a recommended spot to go to. That and Linux Mint are the main two recommended spots in terms of learning Linux. But for me, Bazite for me is going to be a mainstay because there wasn't really a whole lot I had going into Linux in the first place. I just wanted a new spot to call home. I just wanted a new spot that doesn't give me bullshit. I just wanted a new spot that doesn't sit up there and force updates, which is another pro, by the way. That doesn't force updates down my throat every fucking chance they get. And ruin something that they had no business ruining. Okay. Sorry for all the yawning. Sorry for the yawning, but basically to put it simply, this is my mainstay. This is my main area. This is where I want to go. Now I have another SSD coming. I'm gonna use that strictly just for Windows gaming. Other than that, that's it for me. I mean, this is where I want to be. This is where I want to stay in. Cause look, despite the flaws, despite the cons, I've loved Linux for one thing and one thing only, because it's felt like for me ever since I installed it, I felt like, you know, despite the trials and tribulations and the bullshit, I still feel free at the end of the day. Like I'm free to actually run my computer the way that I want to run it. Okay, sorry about that. I had an alarm go off. But yeah, it runs it the way that I want to run it, and that's essentially how I think it should go at the end of the day. Other than that, that's it. Till then, as always, every second, every minute, every hour you're showing me is every second, every minute, every hour. I'm blessed and thankful for you guys. Have yourself a good rest of the day, night, or evening. And maybe I'll see you again on the next tutorial. Hopefully I won't have to make another tutorial. Hopefully that'll be it. Till then, bye.